Thank you so very much for the opportunity to share my perspectives on this very important topic predicated on political party processes. I've listened very carefully to the submissions made by my learned brother of the Sulk, and I'm convinced that he has covered all the field, and I wish there was part of the modalities to allow me align myself completely with the submission and just sit back. It's not possible, Mr. Chairman. Okay, thank you. Let me add to the very beautiful presentation by my learned brother Sulk. I'd like to provide a foundational intervention, and the perspective from where I'm going to come relates to civic participation. And I'm going to talk from the perspective of a player in the industry currently serving as a member of one of the subnational legislatures. Now, the truth of the matter is that we had a dislocation in 1999 when we returned to democracy, and at that point, those that were supposed to step in and take over the realms of leadership developed lethargy and sat back. The truth of the matter is that as we speak today, there is a capture, and those that should be led are actually leading. Now, the entire spectrum of our political landscape is dominated by persons who should actually be listening to others, who should actually be at the back seat. And you will find that a lot of the questions that the previous presentation raised were questions that would have actually been answered in the affirmative if we had the right set of people on the saddle. And I say this because a lot of the people that I speak to every day who talk from the comfort of their bedrooms or talk from their social gatherings talk about a change they desire. They talk about a status, as a political status quo or a democratic situation they desire, but actually do not walk the talk. As long as we maintain that trajectory, where all we do is sit down and talk, and where the political class, the working class, the intelligentsia, and those of us that actually know, sit back and just talk, and not do a bit of visit to the courts and the custodial centers like my brother Shori, a lot will not change. And I say this with every sense of responsibility. I sit in a State House of Assembly, and every day I watch and listen. The day I made the decision to take over the chance to walk the talk, to participate and run elections, the first banton I received were from members of this class who felt that having become a professor, having become a senior advocate of Nigeria, what the hell are you doing in a State House of Assembly? And the answer to me, that I gave was simply that there is a huge void that requires to be filled. And except we step out to provide the kind of leadership that we desire, we will continue to be led by those that we don't desire. And this I'm experiencing in my everyday life as a legislator, because what I find is that I'm a lone ranger in the midst of strangers, and every day I understand even the more reason why the questions that were raised for determination by my learned brother Sulk may not be answered in the affirmative. Because the reality is that we are confronted by a situation where we have square pegs struggling to fit into round holes. Now, with that as my opening remark, I want to then speak about internal democracy. Now, internal democracy is supposed to serve as a foundation for our global democracy. because it is a microcosm of the experimentation that we expect from players who would eventually emerge at the global platform. Now, how do we expect that, from a crop of people who are unable to demonstrate internal democracy from the party level to do any better when they eventually get elected? Now, this speaks to the capture that I was referring to in my opening remark. You will find that there is a competition between the legal instruments we have in Nigeria, electoral legal instruments, struggling to control internal party democracy while at the same time attempting to allow a measure of autonomy. These two conflict, and this conflict will continue as long as we have persons on the saddle whose only business is politics. And as long as we continue to have persons whose only business is politics, rest assured that they will leave no stone unturned in ensuring the continued manipulation of the system to guarantee their survival. And I dare say, which I always say at many fora, that this return that we are attempting to do requires a measure of consensus from amongst us. And by measure of consensus, I mean that there is the need for us to make the decision, if it is today, to join the process, like I did, to make this sacrifice, like I did and like Shore is doing, because as long as we are not there, they will give us direction, and as long as they continue to give us direction, we'll wake up one day and your Megad will be the leader that you're not expecting. And I'm very serious about it. And I'm very, very serious about it. So, and the reason is because we just enjoy our comfort as elites, but without any formidable guarantees for the future. And the degeneration and deterioration is ongoing, unaverted. And as long as this continues to grow, the issues of internal party democracy will only remain academic. Because those that have taken over the system, those that have perfected the capture, will continue to ensure that the system remains favorable to them, because they know that once they quit, it will be hellish for them to be able to survive. Now, quickly, I'd like to talk about candidate selection. I'm up as one of the candidates that is seeking re-election, and I will tell you that every day I sit down and look at what's going on, I actually do wonder whether I want to go through this process. The reason being that it is a combination of inhuman and impracticable processes that requires you to almost give up yourself, because the weapons of the process of selection, as it is currently under the Electoral Act, are skewed in favor of these people who I've talked about have perfected the capture. And having removed the indirect primaries, which I was a party to, I won my elections under the indirect primaries. And I will tell you that it is worse than the lion's den. It is worse than the lion's den because there is a clear commodification of the process of choosing candidates for political parties. And I felt a bit of relief when the Electoral Act 2026 removed from the Electoral Act the indirect primaries. But yet again, we're being confronted by another monster, which is the consensus option or the indirect primaries. Either way, it is a case of the deep blue sea and the devil, quite frankly. The reason is because the consensus is actually going to be conducted by a couple of wise men. And the wise men have become unreachable, they have become untouchable, and they have become unapproachable. And in the next couple of days, I don't know, maybe either way for me, it's okay. I might be joining my learned brother Silken Court if my week is returned to me, to say, well, you know what, just go back to your old work and continue. And the reason this is happening is because you all are not there. All we do is talk at workshops and conferences and seminars like this about how best things can be done. But I can tell you that the way to do it is not easy because they know themselves and they favor themselves. And when the time comes, they know who to pick and who not to pick. And I can tell you that as long as you have only a few of your type there, they will either not survive or continue to fight survival issues. Now, I'd like to add to the pre-election status quo that my learned brother Silk spoke about. There has been an experience in legal electoral jurisprudence over the years as to the subject of interference with internal party business, the subject of the provisions of the Electoral Act, and the subjects of the constitutional provisions. Now, like my little brother Silk said, Section 138 of the new Electoral Act has actually reduced the grounds for election petition. And the two grounds are very clearly the only questions can be raised in an election petition only when there are electoral malpractices or a violation of the provisions of the Electoral Act on the one hand, or on the other hand, that the respondent did not win his election by a majority of the lawful votes cast during the election, leaving out the issue of qualification. Now, that's the provision of Section 138. Now, try to juxtapose that with the provisions of Section 55, 56, and maybe Section 106 and Section 107 of the 1999 Constitution as amended. Now, the provisions of these sections that I outlined clearly stated the preconditions upon which a candidate can stand election. Conditions like citizenship, conditions like the minimum academic threshold, conditions like age, which is 25 years for State House of Assembly, and other conditions. Now, I also tried to read the provisions of Section 29, subsection 4 and 5 of the Electoral Act. The operative word in Section 29, subsection 4 is that any person, that's the operative word, could approach INEC to apply for certified true copies of all the nomination form, the supporting affidavit, and other documents that the candidate for an election may have submitted to INEC. And subsection 5 then went ahead to provide that only aspirants that participated in the primaries of their political parties who have reasonable grounds to believe that the documents submitted by their candidates were false or blah, 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 will approach the Federal High Court to litigate in a pre-election matter. So for me, and I hope that we will be able to find answers today, is so it is not a disqualification is not a pre-election matter, and it's not a post-election matter. So if I'm not a member of a political party that submitted that candidate to INEC, but contesting election with this guy, I believe, did not meet the prerequisites provided for in the Constitution. And in the light of the provisions of Section 1, subsection 1, and subsection 3 of the 1999 Constitution, will that provision not actually be said to be in violation of the provisions of the 1999 Constitution? Because for me, I'm looking for where to litigate. Yes, I'm looking because I've contested election with someone I know did not qualify under the provisions of the Constitution. And the law has said, since he's not of the same political party with me and I was not an aspirant in his political party, I can't litigate in a pre-election matter. And the grounds for filing electoral petitions have removed qualification. And now it is only on grounds of malpractice and the violation of the provisions of the Electoral Act. So I want to join my learned brother Silk to add to the questions that would be answered by you at today's interaction so that we can continue to improve the body of our electoral jurisprudence and provide for Nigerians the leaders that they deserve. Thank you so very much.